Okay, so for fluency, we are now introducing a new concept. It's maybe not new to you, but it's new in sixth grade this year. So what I mean by that is if we're looking at this first question for fluency, it says find the product of 2 and 3/10 and 1 and 8/10. We have the word product. Product is going to be a vocabulary word that we're going to be focusing on. And product is the answer to a multiplication problem. So when we are multiplying decimal points, there's a new rule, there's a different rule than when you are adding and subtracting them. When we add and subtract, we line up those decimal points, we line up the digits. When we're multiplying, there's a different rule. What you do is you count how many numbers are after the decimal point. So if we're looking at 2 and 3/10, I see just a 3 and I see just an 8, okay? So that means that there's a 3 and an 8. That's two numbers that are behind the decimal point. So I always put a circle on my paper and I put how many numbers behind the decimal point. So I would put a 2 in the bubble. And the reason that is because it's kind of like we need to save that for later. Because now we need to start by multiplying those numbers. But that 2 is going to be important later on. So what we're going to do here is we are going to take the decimal point out. I know it sounds crazy that we're taking the decimal point out, but I promise you it's so much easier in the end to do that. So we are going to just write the numbers as they are. So we're just going to put 23, even though it's 2 and 3/10, we're just going to put 2 and 3. And then we're going to do times 8, 1 and 8, which in this case right now it's going to be 18. Okay. So now I have to begin to multiply. So if you struggle with multiplication, you have your multiplication chart right here. You just have to click on the X, it'll take you to it. So 3 times 8, I know, and then you begin multiplying, I'm sorry, you begin to multiply, okay? 3 times 8 is 24, so I'd put my 4, just like I normally would, and I put my 2. Okay, so now I have 8 times 2, which is 16, plus that 2. You got to add that 2 to it. So 16, 17, 18. So now I just put my 18. Okay. Now this is where I think some of us may struggle with, and that's when I have this yellow X here for you. This yellow X means that if you have more than one number down here means there's another row, meaning we're going to have to go below that 184. So I like to say another number, another row. So that means we have another number, so we have to cross off that 8 because we're done with it. We've multiplied it all out. We don't need to do it. So now we need to move place value. So now that we're in underneath our 1, and technically right now it's the 10 spot, we have to start our column, our place value underneath the 8. But in order to do so, we have to add a 0. Okay, so every time you add a new row, you have to add a 0. So I'm going to add my 0 below the 4, and then I'm going to begin to multiply now as if it's 1 times 23. So I would do 1 times 3, which is 3. And I would do 1 times 2, which is 2. Okay, and then I'm going to begin, and it's okay again if you go off the page, that's fine. You're going to have to now add those two numbers up. So we begin to add them up. So we have 4 plus 0, 4. 8 plus 3 is 11. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. So now this is where it's kind of important now. What I mean by important is this is where the 2 that you put in that bubble comes into play. That 2 tells you how many times you're going to move that decimal point back into your number. So right now we have 414. And we know with whole numbers, the decimal point is always at the end. So right now the decimal point is located right here if this was our problem, because in whole numbers the decimal point is always at the end. But we have that 2 in our bubble. So that means we have to move this decimal point 2 times to the left. So that means we are going to swoop 1, swoop 2, and the decimal point would go in between the 4 and the 1, which means our answer now is 4 and 14/100ths. Okay, I know that some of you are probably like, yeah, I know how to do this. This is easy. We got this. And some of you may be struggling. Okay, so please take your time on it. We are spending a couple weeks on multiplying decimals, and I promise it'll get easier as you continue practicing it through fluency. Okay, so our next problem says, what is the difference? Now we should be able to fly through this one because we've been working with the word difference for 4 weeks now, and we know that difference means the answer to a subtraction problem. We've also been dealing with whole numbers, 13, and we know that when we have a whole number, it's at the end of it, so, or behind all the numbers. So we have 13, so it would be 1, 3, and the decimal point's behind it, so you put it behind it. And remember, I always say use 2 zeros as your placeholders just to be safe. And then you're subtracting. And you're subtracting 7 and 124 thousandths. So I put my decimal point. Just a sneak peek for you all. Your writing on Friday is going to be over subtracting decimal points. Your 7 is in your ones place, so your 7 goes in underneath your 3. Your 1 is in your tenths place, so it goes under the 0, your first 0. Your 2 is in the hundredths place, so your 2 goes under the next 0. And then you have a 4, which is in your thousandths place. So like I said, yeah, it's nice to have 2 zeros, but sometimes you may have to add more. So you're going to have to add another 0 onto your 13. Okay? Now this is where our rules change from adding and subtracting and multiplying. When you're subtracting, you just drop that decimal point straight on down. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it down, drop it down, drop it down. So you drop it down. And then you begin to subtract. 0 minus 4, we cannot do that. So we know that we have to go to our 0 next door. Well, they don't have anything to give us, so we have to go to the next door neighbor. Well, they don't have anything to give us, so we have to go all the way to our next door, which is our 3. So that 3 becomes a 2 because they're given all our zeros to make them 10s. So this one, he's like, thank you, I'll take some of that. So he becomes a 10. Your next door neighbor is like, thank you, I'll take some of that. That neighbor becomes a 10. But now for you to become a 10, you got to take from your neighbors. So now all your neighbors are like, okay, well, we'll give you some. So now your neighbors become 9s because they gave you the ability to be a 10. So now they become 9s. So now we have to subtract. 10 minus 4 is 6. 9 minus 2, 9, 8, 7, 7. 9 minus 1, 8. 2 minus 7, well, we can't do that, so we have to go next door to the 1. The 1 becomes a 0, and the 2 then becomes a 12. And then we have 12 minus 7, which is 5. And then your answer is 5 and 876 thousandths.